really appreciated. So thank you very much for coming out. We recognize that getting out this time of day is sometimes difficult, particularly for all of you parents. But we respect your time, and we're going to take the best advantage of it and allow you an opportunity to meet our finalists. With that said, Darcy.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be in Freetown-Lakeville. I guess I'll start this evening just by giving you a quick overview of my resume, if that's okay with you. And then from there, if you'd like to ask me questions, you can. Does that work for everyone? Great. So let me begin by saying that I'm very excited about the opportunity to be here in Freetown-Lakeville. If you've had a chance to look at my resume, first and foremost, I was born and raised in Wareham, right down the street. I taught there for 13 years as a social studies teacher. As part of my role there, not only was I a social studies teacher, I was also the director of the after-school program, director of the middle school service learning program, and also a parent liaison for the district. When I left Wareham, I went on to go to Brockton Public Schools, where I became an assistant principal. I was an assistant principal for about a year and 2 months, and then my principal got sick, and I became the interim principal of the building. While I was there, they asked me to transfer all the junior highs in the city to middle schools. I did that by revising the schedule, putting together common planning time for teachers, and realigning the structures to ensure that students were getting what they needed. While there, we went from the lowest performing middle school to one of the highest performing middle schools in the city. What happened was when I arrived, they had a change in the whole student body within the school. The year before I came, it was the gifted and talented school for the city, meaning that students who had scored in advanced levels were at West Junior High School. And then it changed and transferred over to a regular core junior high school. So all of the gifted and talented students moved out of the building, and in came a flood of students with some great needs. And so there was a lot of work that had to be done with the staff and with the students to kind of get them to congeal together as a team, because there was a large change in the dynamic within the school. I then left there because I had an opportunity to be principal at Roosevelt Middle School, which is in the south end of New Bedford. Just so you know, Roosevelt Middle School is one of the first designated turnaround schools within the state of Massachusetts. When I arrived there, there were a couple of things they wanted me to do. The first focus was really on the ELL population. We had all of the ELL students for the whole city, and the program was not tight, and they really wanted me to work on establishing and reconfiguring the way in which that program worked. And they also wanted me to work on a way to integrate some classes for students who accelerated, while also working on putting together a program to support students who had significant needs. There are two things that I really think came out of my work there. First of all, I started a pre-college program with Bridgewater State College. That particular program allowed any student who was in needs improvement or below on the MCAS to have a pre-college experience where they actually got to live on campus for 2 weeks at Bridgewater State. While there, they got focused in on their math and ELA scores. And then during the year, what would happen is those people they work with on campus would then tutor them throughout the school year for extra support. That particular program was funded fully through a partnership that I created with Bridgewater State University. The other piece that became essential in that building was we put together what I call an Amigo Center. And that was a center for our families. Many of our families had immigrated to the United States. They were having a difficult time transitioning. I don't know if you know the history of New Bedford, but at one point they closed one of the factories in New Bedford and took most of the immigrant families in. That left a large number of our students without any place to go at the end of the school day. And so there was a distrust happening in the city that we needed to repair. So we worked in partnership with the Immigrants Assistance Center within that community and actually created an Amigo Center. That Amigo Center was for all families, no matter what your background, but it was a way to have a neutral set of people working with families and working with the school department. So the Immigrants Assistance Center would hire the staff, even though the funding came from the district, to work in the center, and then those center people would collaborate with the families and give them an advocate when they went into meetings, whether it was for an IEP, for working with the teachers, and also for wraparound services, because many of those families needed assistance and help. So that went very well. At the end of my 5 years, I applied to be assistant superintendent in Randolph Public Schools. I got that position, again, a district in turnaround. And are you seeing a pattern? A district in turnarounds at that particular time, they were considered a level 4 school district. They had hired me to work very diligently on moving the schools within that district. And I did that through a data decision-making program that we infused along with common planning time and professional development for teachers. And in that focus, 3 things became critical. First, in order to figure out what kids need, we first have to see their data. That's number 1. So we put in place the NWEA program, which tested kids every quarter to see how they were doing in math and English. From that data cycle, during common planning time, teachers would look at the data and make determinations about what are the issues that kids are struggling with, and then we put in place time to give kids support. And I want to make sure you understand what I mean by support, because oftentimes people think the only people who are providing support for are those kids who are in a situation where their needs improvement are below. That was not the case with us. So if there was a situation where a student scored advanced, the question became, how do we accelerate that student? What can we put in place for that individual student so they will grow as well? Because our job as a public school is always to make sure kids move upwards in their academics, regardless of where they start. And that's always been my mantra. We're here for everyone, not just one special set of kids, but everyone. So we looked at how do we accelerate this set of children while also providing remediation for this set of children. So we were able to put a balance in place within the district that allowed times when I worked with all my peers and other times when I was in a homogeneous setting working with my peers who were on the same level with me. And so it was a real combination that worked, and by the time I left, the district was out of turnaround. I then left there and I went to Athol Royalston Regional School District. Just so you know, Athol is one of the lowest income municipalities in the whole state of Massachusetts. This was a very different demographic, however, that I was working with. In my previous schools, the majority of students who I worked with were minority. Here, that wasn't the case. The population that we were really looking at were low-income students who were struggling, and how do we work towards fixing and supporting them in the school district, and also, again, accelerating those kids who are ready. And so I'm very excited to say that since I've been there, we have turned around the middle school already. The middle school is out. We have improved the overall schools at ACES, which was a 1 when I arrived. It is now, on the accountability data, it is now a 6. It probably should be much further along, but as you know, MCAS didn't happen a year ago, and last year it didn't count. So we haven't seen the data for the last 2 years. Our other elementary school went from an accountability of 20, and they were the one school who wasn't in turnaround. They are now a 66. They were actually recognized by the governor's office and the commissioner's office for the amount of growth they were able to make with their students in 2019. So we've seen some great success in Athol. Coming here to Freetown-Lakeville, there are 2 things I want you to know about me. First of all, I feel what's very important is the first thing I have to do is get to know you well. Making a decision on where we should go and what we should do has to be a community effort. It can't be Darcy Fernandez writing a plan and saying, this is what I want for your children. So if I was hired to be the superintendent of this district, the first thing I would do is a template of an entry plan, which I would give to the school committee, along with the community. I would present it and say, here's the things I'd like to look at. Here's some of the questions I'd like to ask, and say, does this seem right to get the answers to before moving forward and figuring out what we need? Those questions would come directly from your current strategic plan. Because what I wouldn't want to do is blow up what you've already said you want, but instead do a check to see how you're doing in those areas and see how we can move forward. From that, I would then spend my first few months here interviewing everything from community members to students to staff to parents and asking these questions and taking all that data and putting it out on a spreadsheet and saying, what is it telling us about what's going on in this community? And then what can we do as a team to make some changes? I would then put that proposal out publicly and ask for feedback on it. Does this sound right? Is this the right fit for this community moving forward? Because every community I've been in is different and their needs are different. And so what I wouldn't want to do is to set up this prefabricated process that doesn't allow the voices of the people who are here to be part of it. And then once we were in agreement that that's where we want to go, we begin moving. And what I would do and what I do every month in every district I've been in is an update on the strategic plan. Where are we at? What's going well? What do we need to work on? Are there any mid-course corrections that we need to make? Because even the best laid plans can go awry. There's no doubt about it. And so you want to be careful to make sure you don't just say, because I put this plan out, it's 100% going to work. What you want to constantly be doing is checking data to see if it's working. And the data is not just about students' test scores. It's about asking teachers, how's it going, what's working, what's not. Asking the students how it's going, asking the parents, and using that to continually say, what do we do in order to foster and ensure that we're moving in the direction that the community wants. So that's a little bit about me. So I'll stop at this point and I guess open it up for any questions people may have.
So of course, you know, as a community, we Googled all of the participants.
Absolutely.
And we did see some information online that was worrisome.
Yes.
So then we reached out further to the parents of the FL school system, and there were quite a few comments that, you know, were very negative. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. There is no, I want to be very transparent and clear. Back in 2018, I was in a situation as a superintendent where it was reported to me that an individual child was at a basketball game and was called some racist remarks. It was my responsibility as superintendent of schools to do a couple of things. One, to ensure that the situation was investigated. Two, make a determination about what that situation was. And then number three, move forward with any consequences. My role was not to do the investigation. My role was to make sure a civil rights investigator or Title IX person, which I'm sure you have here, would go ahead and do that. In that process, they had a finding. And that was very difficult because it basically acknowledged the fact that something was said at that game. Whether they were not able to determine who said it, but they were able to determine that it did happen. And that caused a lot of friction within the district. In addition to that, at the same time, we had begun incorporating a program into our school district, which really is called Facing History in Ourselves. I don't know how many of you are aware of it. Anyone? Okay, we have a few. So we incorporated Facing History in Ourselves because one of the things that was going on in the district was there was some concern and worry about the way in which students were treating one another. And so we had put that program into place. In putting that program into place, there was a parent who came to school committee and basically stated that the teacher had not appropriately discussed the difference between what was going on with Blue Lives Matters and what was going on with Black Lives Matters. And that became an issue, a problem as well. At that particular juncture, again, once it was reported to me, it was my responsibility to do an investigation. Again, it went to the civil rights officer who did the investigation, and there was no finding there either. But it has been difficult, and it's been difficult for me there, and that's one of the reasons why I'm choosing to leave, because at the end of the day, we have a difference of opinion in relationship to the way in which we need to work. I will say to you, you can go online and you can see this in the district. One of the major three goals of the district is equity, and that was decided by the community. What we did was we put together a strategic plan for 5 years, the first 5 years while I was there. It completed, and we started the new one, which began this year. In that particular strategic plan, the families decided equity was important because, again, there's been a rub happening in the district. And so we continue that work, and it's been very tender to go through the process. I will say to you two things. One, we surveyed the parents the year these complaints began. 92% of the parents in the district were satisfied with my leadership as superintendent. In addition to that, there were several things that came in the paper that just were not accurate. And unfortunately, my responsibility as a superintendent is two things. One, I have to go through a process, certain things I just can't say publicly. One of those things was they claimed that they had a survey where a large amount of people had signed it and were concerned about it. This was the survey was actually put on a website called Turtle Boy. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Turtle Boy. On the website, basically people put their names onto the website. You don't know if it was a person or not. So all they produced was a list with not one signature on it. So we don't even know if in fact that was true. So it's been a struggle. I'm not going to lie to you. But I would say to you, the majority of the families are very satisfied with me within Athol Royalston. Unfortunately, with Facebook, with Twitter, these days, things can get skewed and they can be seen a certain way. But I'm not going to sit here and hide and say that there are a set of people who are dissatisfied. I'd be lying to you. But what I can say to you, if you look back in my history, example in New Bedford, I was selected as Woman of the Year for my efforts and my energy in working with families in that community. I actually had the complete opposite thought process. I had the same thing in other communities I worked in. When I was in Wareham, I was honored for Community Service Teacher of the Year. I was honored by Renaissance for the work I was doing with students within the classroom. I was selected as a semifinalist for Teacher of the Year. And so it's frustrating to me as well because I've done outstanding work. And unfortunately, I have a set of people who don't necessarily agree. And the one thing I can say is I'm never going to please everyone. I'd like to say I can, but there are times that I have to make hard decisions. And they have to be made. But I appreciate you asking the question.
Can I ask one more? So,
yes.
You had reported a civil liberties action against the students. Since they're children, even, 18-year-olds are still, juvenile in some sense. Wouldn't it have been better to work it out between parents and the communities? And, I think it says a lot to teach children how to communicate, say sorry, figure those things out. But to go right for that civil liberties complaint, it's a rough thing. Those are children. I think that's the big thing we have to understand, that they're children.
Yeah. Two things. First of all, by law, I have to do it. So that's the first thing you need to know. If somebody comes to me, the civil rights law from Massachusetts, you have to. You don't have a choice.
If somebody
reports to you there was a racial issue that happened within a school, you have to by law investigate it. You don't have a choice. It's not an option.
I'll have to look that up.
Okay?
I have not seen that.
Yeah. Number two, please be aware that we did work it out. Even after the finding, the conversation that we had was, how do we go about working with the students so that this doesn't happen again? And so now we have training with the students across the district in relationship to this topic as a way. And the way in which we did it was we brought the parents together and the teachers and had a conversation as a team about what the issues were, how could we resolve them, and they came up with a solution. I did not. We allowed the team to do that. But what I would say to you is sometimes legally we don't have options as superintendent. We have to follow that. If I took the complaint and did not file it, I would have lost my license as a superintendent. I have to do that.
Okay. I'm probably going to ask this to all of the candidates, but so of course the last 2 years have been very stressful. And, there are a lot of unlawful things that occurred to children and some civil rights violations, with religious exemptions and things. And you seem like you have a really good history and have gotten a lot of accolades from the state, but I think a lot of parents in the group is growing, realize that we don't really want that kind of coercion attachment to the state. So that's like the DEI programs, the SEL programs, that Castle, who's funded by Bill and Melinda Gates, it's their theories and brought into their school. I think parents want to really have a bigger say, and they really want to be able to control that, we're not getting carrots waved from the state for money so that each individual child can go into the SEL program because they had a tummy ache for a week from something. There's just so many mountains of things happening in education where it should really just strictly be education and core education, and some of these other things aren't necessary. So how would you work around something like that with the parents?
I think, first of all, I think we would have to have a group of parents come together and decide what is best for this community. Everybody has their thoughts. The goal would be to try to come to an understanding as a team as to what it is we would do. And I would hope if I became superintendent of the district, one of the first things I would want to do is invite people in to hear what some of those concerns are. As I said with the strategic plan, that would be extremely important. I would want you to come with those people who have those concerns and really hear out what's going on. I believe in two things. The first thing I believe in is the district has to have a shared vision. And we have to come up with that together. And that has to be something that we can see for all of our students. So what is the shared vision we have for all of our students? And then we work from there. And that would be important. And we need to bring every voice to the table. We can't say, only this people or only these people. We need to bring them all together. And what we got to get to an agreement is, when we leave this area, we're all in agreement that this is the way we're going to move. But that's how I would approach it.
Okay, and so that's a very democratic way. Mm-hmm. What I find is like we forget individualism mm-hmm. and individual rights. Mm-hmm. And it's slowly been happening all over the state. So, it's not just this is just a vision in general. So you may have, those parents who think that SEL is great for their child, but there might be, half of them who don't. Like, so I know you can come together and say, yeah, we'll put the program in place, but I think we're looking for no, if people want to opt out, there's always that option. And actually they should all have to opt in if they want it, not get confused with opt outs.
What I would say to you is that's a conversation we can have. I'm not going to say to you yes, I'm not going to say to you no. What we would have to do is have a conversation. There are certain things by law in which we have to offer children, which we need to do. Beyond that, we can have a discussion. I'm not going to say yes, I'm not going to say no. I would want to hear directly from you and what's going to work for your child and your family and see what we can do, because I agree with you. Even when we look at our individual students, we have some students who have disabilities. We have some students who have certain religions. We have some students who may come up from a background that's not here in the United States. And we really want to listen to those opinions. We don't want to squash them. We want to listen to them and figure out what's the best fit that would work for your individual child, but at the same time, the whole district. And sometimes we have to do a delicate balance with that, but that's what we'd want to do.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
I appreciate you asking the questions.
Hi, Jennifer Lewis, Freetown.
Hi.
Ms. Fernandez, you talked about your experience at other districts, and you talked about how different Athol was from the districts that you had previously worked in. Now Freetown-Lakeville is, again, different from all of the districts that you've worked in previously. Yes. I assume that you've researched our schools. So I guess you've said that you want to get everyone involved and get everyone's ideas, but I haven't heard really what your initial thoughts are. I'm interested in, what are you going to bring to the table?
One, I'd say to you that first of all, what I've seen in your data is you are a middle of the road school district. You're doing fairly well academically with your students. I think you can do better. And the reason why I say that is I'm looking at your student growth percentile. Your student growth percentile should be in the 50s. It's around 35. And so what that means is students are doing well. However, their capacity is much larger. And so how do we do that, first of all? How do we move that along? That would be one of the things. The second thing for me, which is solely really important, is I want to understand our kids well enough to see what they want for their community and see how we can get them involved in it. Because student voice, to me, is one of the first priorities any superintendent should have. Because they're the ones we serve. And we need to be able to listen to them. We need to understand what they are saying is important and try our best to put that into place. So an example I'll give you, when I was in Wareham Public Schools, my students said to me, Ms. Fernandez, we don't like our town. I said, what don't you like about it? And they said, well, a bunch of things. I said, well, what specifically don't you like? And they listed out the things of concern. I said, well, what's the venue in which you go to have that conversation? And we talked about the fact that the way you have that conversation is through town council, through community members. And so what we put together was some proposals about what they wanted to see change in the town. One was they wanted a skateboard park. Two, they wanted a Fonzie restaurant. That's the way they labeled it. Three, they wanted to be in a situation where students had more voice in the public spaces within the community. And so what they did was they had a fair where the community came and they listened to all the things they were looking for. And then they went to the council and asked the question, is there a way we can get some of those things? 3 out of the 4 things they asked for actually got put into place in Wareham. And that was wonderful to see because all of a sudden they saw themselves as part of the community. And one of the things we have to realize is the reason why public schools have been put in place is in order for our kids to be vested in the democracy of our community. And the way in which you get involved is 2 ways. 1, being able to critically think about what the problems are. And 2, be able to communicate your particular opinion and work towards helping that be met. And so we want to create that in kids. We want to create opportunities for that. So in Freetown-Lakeville, that would be something that I would talk about and see if families were interested in. I think the other thing that I would want to really pay attention to in the community is I look at this community and there are feels like two different sets of groups here. You've got people who are very much, how do I put it? Kind of they like the landscape. They'd like to be in an area that's not overly populated and maybe more working with the land. And then you have a group of individuals who work in the city and go there every day, and they're working and committed to whatever's going on with their individual company. And what I would want to do is figure out from the kids, what does that mean for you and your vision and for your community moving forward, and how do we get you there? How do we get you there? So those would be the key elements for me that I would want to work on. But I want to say to you again, it's not about Darcy Fernandez. It's about the larger community. I will bring forth my ideas, but at the end, we have to see that other individuals are committed to the same thing to move forward with it. Because I could sit here and say, we're going to put in more driver's ed programming. And people say, why? We don't need that, right? It won't fit your school district. So I really want to make sure that, yes, I'll bring my ideas to the table, but at the same time, I want to make sure we're really paying attention to the students and the families and what they're looking for. Did that help?
Hi, Ms. Fernandez.
Hi.
Tina Rogers from Lakeville. So I'm so happy to hear that you reference students, SGP.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of connects to my question. And I think we live in a wonderful community. We have very dedicated administrators and teachers. And I think that number of 35% SGP is quite telling that our students are achieving, but they're not growing. And I think it's tightly connected to the curriculum instruction within the district, and as it kind of connects and relates to professional learning.
Yes.
And as a parent, I will say over the years, I see what comes home. I have a high schooler, a middle schooler, and elementary school. And it's concerning at times. I, hear what they talk about, what they're doing in class again with very highly qualified teachers who are doing the best that they can. So I guess I'd just like to hear about your thoughts and visions around curriculum revision and that process, and then also how that connects to kind of professional learning that the teachers receive. Because I think years ago, coaches were cut from schools, and just innately in that, a lot of conversations about instruction get left to the administrator, and then, things like that. So I just would love to hear about your experience.
Absolutely. My first love is curriculum instruction. Working in Randolph, that was my role. And one of the things that I found is that when you look at curriculum, the first thing you have to do is decide where do you begin. You can't do everything overnight. And the way you begin starts with knowing your data well. So where are our kids not necessarily performing? We want to check the curriculum there first. And the reason why we want to do is we want to make sure that if our curriculum is not right, that we fix it, because that's not fair to teachers. And one of the things we always make an assumption about is the teacher that isn't getting the kids there. It could very well be the curriculum. So an example I'll give you is in a previous district, I looked at the materials the teachers were using for the kids, and they were 2 grade levels below in their reading levels. That wasn't helping. So the teacher was moving kids, but the problem was it was 2 grade levels below, so all the kids looked like they were doing well, and then they test and you'd find out they weren't there. So I really want to look at the data and say, where are the areas of concern, and work through that process. The second thing I'd want to do is, who are our shining stars within the district who have really been able to move their data? And how do we use them to help provide support for our teachers? I put that structure into place in Athol. What we have is teacher leaders at each grade level. And those teacher leaders are responsible for the common planning time and helping to move the teachers forward. And the people we put into those positions are the ones we feel are really the strongest in that grade level. And what they do is they go through this cycle of data. They start with, what is the outcome that we want for our students? Very first thing. Once we know the outcome, and that's based on the state standards, so these are the issues or things kids need to know. Secondly, if that's what they need to know, what do we expect kids to be able to do at the end of the lesson to get there? Then from there, we create the lesson. Because the problem is, if you do it any other way, what happens is you end up creating activity, not a lesson. So, you ever hear the igloo story of classrooms? Kids come home and they've made all these sugar igloos and everybody loves them. They're so wonderful. The kid talks about how connected they were and loved it. And then the question gets asked, what was the purpose of the lesson? No answer. That becomes a problem because what they did was they engaged the students, but the problem was they didn't engage them in any critical thinking to move them forward. So it just became an activity. And we really want to look at that. And when we design curriculum, the first thing we do is we ask, what are the essential things kids need to know when they leave this classroom? And they need to be able to demonstrate that. And that's what we want to be able to look at. First of all, do your teachers have a sense of that? Is it posted on the board? Is it an objective that actually says what that is? Is it aligned to the actual curriculum, the state frameworks? Is the activity the student's going to do going to give the output to show if they really understand it? So an example I'll give you is I watched a little while ago in a classroom, and a teacher put up on the board, it's the student's responsibility to understand characterization of the individuals within the story. And by the end of the lesson, their responsibility is to demonstrate how someone's character has changed over time. I then looked at the questions that the students were being asked. Name the character, name the place where the character was, and tell me what the character did here. They never asked a big question. So at the end, the teacher probably graded it and everybody did wonderful, but the problem was it didn't matter. I ended up getting an A in something that was not tied to the framework. And so we want to pay close attention to that. And one of the ways you do that is by getting into classrooms and working with teachers. I do it every week. I'm in classrooms all the time, and I'm not there to inspect, I'm there to support. And the way in which I do that is I work with the principals, we walk together, we talk about what's going on, and we give feedback to teachers. And we give feedback that's positive and a thing they can work on. And what we do is we narrow the focus down to a few things. So in my district right now, our very first priority is critical thinking. And so the first thing we're looking for when we go into your classroom is, are you giving students critical thinking questions? That's number one. Number two, are students getting the opportunity to have conversations with each other so that they can actually logically walk through their process? And three, does the student have an entry point to be able to have a conversation? And let me explain to you what I mean by entry points. Entry point means it's already in your schema. You already have it in your brain, so you can start the conversation. What you don't want to do is start students out with a conversation about something they don't know, because what ends up happening? You sit there in silence, and you don't have the opportunity to really take part and learn. And so what you want to be able to do is have that entry point. So in an elementary classroom last week, I walked the building, and the kids were learning about measurement tools. They had to use rulers, they had to use yardsticks, they had to distinguish which tool would I use for my particular situation. And so the teacher asked the students, tell me about your bed. Tell me what the size of it is. Is it large? Is it small? What do you know about it? If you were to use one of these tools, which one would you use? That gave every kid in the room an entry point because they all had seen a bed, heard about a bed, and knew about it. So they had an entry point. Remember, this is first grade. I'm not talking about, 10th grade. But those entry points are extremely important because brain research tells us that you cannot learn if you don't have an anchor within your own brain. You just can't. And we have to learn to know our students well enough so that we can find an entry point for them to learning, and you're going to see much more success once you get to that point. You're welcome.
How you doing? Jeff Lewis, Freetown, Mass. I just got one quick question for you.
Yes.
It's a couple weeks too late on this question, but I just want to see what your views are on mask mandates and masking children in public spaces.
Sure. Let me start. I don't know if you've had a chance to read this, but in Athol, we were one of the few school districts that was open during the whole pandemic. We allowed our parents to make the choice. What is it you're looking for? Some of our parents wanted their kids in school. Some of our parents wanted their kids at home. And so what we did was we streamed our classes, which allowed parents who wanted their kids at home to be at home, and parents who wanted their kids in. As far as the mask mandate is concerned, that was the decision of the school committee, not me. Because what the state of Massachusetts says very clearly is when it comes to policy, and masking is policy, it is the school committee's determination. I will say to you that I have to advise the school committee, and I did say to the school committee that I believe masks should be worn. Particularly in our community, we have a large number of medically fragile students. And my concern was for those students, because I have, for example, a parent right now whose child is going through chemo. She has cancer. And if she was sitting in a classroom with a bunch of kids without a mask on, that could have caused her a dilemma. I will say to you, now the science is telling us we shouldn't have masks anymore. They're gone. It's an option. And I've written to all of our parents, and I've said very clearly, you no longer have to wear masks. However, please keep in mind the following. We need to be respectful of everyone. So if you don't want to wear a mask, that's fine. If you want to wear a mask, that's fine. But at the end of the day, what is most important is that we find a way to have empathy for everyone. Because what we don't want to do is make someone feel bad if they are wearing a mask. We don't want to make some feel bad because they're not wearing a mask. But it was difficult. We're still in a time where there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, I'm reading the paper today, and they're talking about some of our Asian communities, and what we're seeing is it's rising again. And our fear is what's going to happen in another 9 months. Are we going to still be in this situation or not? It's difficult. If there's no easy answer, it is not something any of us have had to line up with in the past. It's a difficult situation. But what I would say to you again is that as part of my role, I would advise the school committee. My first responsibility would be to look at what other people are saying about this, from the CDC to the state, and make that recommendation. And at the end, the elected officials would make the determination about what the next steps would be.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name's Anne Marie Sherrick. I'm from Lakeville. My question, I guess, is coming. I wear two hats. I'm a teacher in another district, and then here thinking about my own children. One of the things we're seeing across the nation right now is a huge teacher turnover, teacher burnout. You know, me being a teacher for 25 years, I've thought, maybe this isn't for me right now. It's been a rough couple of years. So I'm wondering about retaining the wonderful teachers that we have in the district and the supports that you might put in place for them.
Sure. First, I'll tell you about the supports, and then I'll tell you, secondly, what we're doing to try to work on that. So in our district, we met with the union and we said, what's going on? How can we be of help? And we asked the union, what are some of the things teachers could need? The number one priority for our teachers was more time. They felt like the problem was with the pandemic is a lot of our teachers had to cover for other people because we didn't have enough stuff. So we talked about how to fix that. The first thing I did was I looked at our time on learning in the district. If you don't know what time on learning is, basically the state requires us to do a minimum number of days and a minimum number of hours. So I took a look at our time on learning, and what I realized was in our schools, we were 26 hours over the minimum. So I went to the school committee and I requested a change in our calendar so that we could have a couple of more half days for our teachers so we could support them through that. So that's the first thing I did. The second thing I did is I wanted to show our teachers that we realized they've been doing yeoman's work. And so with our SR money, I requested that $200,000, or just over $200,000, be put aside to give every one of our staff, not just teachers, a bonus this year. And they'll be getting that on March 28th. So we put that in place. The other thing we did was we talked about what are some of the things teachers need to feel better. So we set up a luncheon every month. And so in the lunchroom, we have all these different meals that we're putting aside for teachers. The other thing that we're doing, or what my administrative team has done all year, is we've said we have to help support. I have been everything from a paraprofessional to a teacher to a cafeteria worker because I'm in it with you. I'm not separate. I put my pants on just like everybody else. So we have coalesced and supported the schools in being present and helpful when they have deficits. We have also put in place a recruitment and retention survey for our staff. That went out last month. We worked with the union on writing that survey. The questions then went out to the teachers. We gave them the time during the day to fill it out, so they didn't have to go home at night with their kids and try to do it. So we actually gave them a common plenty time to fill it out. They filled it out, and then once they filled it out, today we began de-aggregating the data to see what the concerns are that the teachers have. And we're going to use that to try to put together a plan to present to the school committee as our next step.
Thank you.
Yep.
I was just hoping, could you repeat what you were saying about the masking? You had said that you were only just offering information, but who had the final say in regards to the masking for the children?
The law by the state of Massachusetts is the school committee. The local municipality makes the decision.
That's right. Okay.
Okay.
That's what I went to.
Yep. Other questions? I hope I'm answering what you want to hear. It may not be, but I'm trying my best. And no question is too small in my opinion. So anything you want to ask, I'm happy to try to answer it. Okay. So as I close, I will say a couple of things to you.
I had a quick question for you, man.
Yes, sure.
Sure. Sean Foley, Lakeville. My question for you is, do you foresee any incorporation of any type of critical race theory teaching into the school district?
Critical race theory is not something that's done in the K-12 arena.
Oh, well, it is in other school districts, so I'm asking you.
Yes, it is not something that I have subscribed to or I believe is part of the state frameworks, and we follow the state frameworks, so that's what we would do.
So you don't believe it should be taught in the schools?
I'm not going to say. That's the decision of the community. So if the community... I know
that, but I'm asking you, man, what you personally feel about it.
What I personally think is that it is our responsibility to make sure all our kids can critically think. That's our responsibility. So that means presenting our children with notions and ideas and letting them determine what's best for them and what their argument is. That's what's most important. So it's not a matter of critical race theory, blue lives versus, Black Lives Matter. It's not that. It's about how we go about getting our kids to understand everybody's point of view and for them to make their own decision. It's not our decision to make decisions for kids or for families. It's our decision to make sure we present multiple points of view so that they can make a decision for themselves. That's what a democracy is.
Right, and that's what critical thinking should be. But my question to you, which I don't think you really got to, was specifically, do you think it should be taught to children in school? I
would say to you no, because it's something that really is at a college level thought process, not at a K-12 process. So is it something I think kids should take part of once they get into a college level? Absolutely. But it's not something that was created for K-12 education. So in my mind, no.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. So as I close, there's a couple of things that I'd say to you. I said, first and foremost, I always make my decisions based on children first. And I always make sure before making a decision that I spend time hearing from multiple points of view. So if there is something happening in a school, I'll ask the principal, I'll ask the teachers, let's talk about it. But at the end, I will make a decision. And it may not always be popular. Most of the time it is, but not always, because we know no matter what decision we make, there are always going to be some people who feel like it wasn't the right one. But I will do my best to do that. I would also tell you that I firmly believe that parents are the number one advocates for children. And so it's important that we have a relationship with families at the teacher level, at my level, at the administrative level, because you know your child best, not me. I did not raise them. I have a 15-year-old at home, and I know who she is, and I know what she's about. And so I advocate for her at her school. They don't always agree with me, but I still have to advocate. That's my child. And I would hope that I would be able to put in place leadership that allows you that opportunity to have that voice. Lastly, I would say to you that my strength and my weakness is I work hard. I don't believe that there's a 9-to-5 day when you're working in schools. I believe I work until the job is done. And if that means I have to be on the weekends, I have to be here on the weekends. If I have to be here in the evening, I have to be here in the evening. So I want you to know that. And I believe in being out in the community. So I hope once I get here that people would invite me. I'm going to try to invite myself to many different venues to hear from people, because I know sometimes people don't feel safe within the school having a conversation. And so I would want to get to a venue where people feel comfortable and be able to have that conversation as well. But I want to thank you and say it's been my honor and pleasure to be here tonight. And I hope that you will think about me as your next superintendent. And if not, if nothing else, it's been a pleasure being here and meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darcy. We're very grateful for your time as well. And again, watching our clock, it's 6:15. You have 15 minutes to get to the next slot, and you can stretch.
What's the doorway in which I go in?
You're going to be Will. Will. He just went out. Are you going to escort?
Yeah, I'm just not sure where to go over there. So. Oh, okay, wonderful. So my car's out here. Thank you. All right, have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, again. This is Jean Fox from the school committee. Thank you for your patience while we do the 15-minute switchover for the candidates. I mentioned to you before, so I don't need to reiterate what our process was. We're very happy you're here to ask each candidate the questions that are of major concern to you, your families, and your children. Our next candidate is Alan Strauss. And I'm going to just let him have the microphone from here on. And again, up there for questions if you don't mind, and name and town would be helpful. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me without this? Can you hear me or not? Oh, you need it for a cable. Gotcha. Sorry. How is everybody tonight? Doing okay? As you know, my name's Alan Strauss, but that means nothing. Let's get into who is this person sitting in front of you. First and foremost, I'm a dad. I'm a father of two. My daughter is a special education teacher in Connecticut. Just got her BCBA. Originally wanted to go to Ivy League. That was her dream. She wanted to do medicine, typical high school student, AP, sports, music, did it all. And then our son was born. Jack. A bundle of joy. That's all I can say about Jack. Born without 50% of his brain. And we were told he potentially could never walk, talk, that life would be incredibly complex. He walks, he talks, doesn't stop talking, doesn't stop walking. But has some significant cognitive and physical disabilities. And it actually changed Taylor's thinking, my daughter, and Jack has really taught us what life is all about. And it's a perspective that I take as a leader, as an educational leader, as a teacher, that everything's okay. We will be okay. We will get through it. We will work it out. If I heard that my son wasn't going to walk and talk and he does, I've learned we're okay. We will be okay. And that's really the perspective. Those of you who've done your research, you found out what happened in Weymouth 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. We had a student murdered. That's the second member of our senior class who passed away this year. We had one captain of the soccer team pass away from brain cancer. We had a member of our football team murdered recently. We get through it. We get through it. And as hard as it is, as difficult as things are, we can get through it. And that's really kind of the belief that I take educationally. My son, who cannot write a letter of the alphabet, he can't even hold a pencil. If you were to take out a song that any of you love, any genre, he can pick up his drumsticks and play it fluently the first time he hears it. He can play the guitar fluently. He can play the piano fluently. And no one taught it to him. So what I've learned is there's no ceiling for kids. We can help our students be everything they want to be. That's our job. That's our responsibility. It's not about money. It's not about anything other than care, concern, relationships, and ensuring that we're doing everything we can for every student in Freetown-Lakeville. So I think it's important for you to understand, I'm not originally from Massachusetts. I'm from that foreign country, Connecticut. And I thought coming here was going to be easy, meaning coming to Mass from Connecticut, and the two states are polar opposites, besides the fact that they like the Yankees versus the Red Sox. I was always a Red Sox fan, so I'll say that right now. I started my career, and I'll just briefly, you can read it in resumes, but resumes aren't going to give you a feel. You need to kind of understand communities. I started my career in Weston, Connecticut, one of the richest communities in the world. I understood accountability. I understood rigor. I understand parent involvement. I understood high expectations. 92, 94, 96% of our kids were taking 2 and 3 and 4 AP classes many years ago. U.S. News and World Report is rated a top 5 school in Connecticut every year for the last 35 years, including a top 100 20 years in a row. It is a top flight district. years in, I said to my superintendent as we were having a conversation, and he asked me, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? And I said, I want your job. That was a little brash and obnoxious, I will say that. But he said, okay, good, go out and see the world, because Western Connecticut is not the world. And so I went to a community in Naugatuck, Connecticut in the Valley, which was 35 to 40% of our students were EL students. About 35% of our students were the first one ever to graduate from high school. But there were still pieces of my background. My dad was a teacher for 44 years. My mom was an artist, one of the first artists for Walt Disney World. So when my dad, he passed away many years ago, but before he passed away, he said to me, if you're going to go to the dark, because he did not like administration at all. If you're going to go to the dark side, never forget the light. Never forget what it's like to be a teacher. Never forget what it's like to be a parent. Never forget what it's like to do all the hard work. And then you can go be an administrator. So I started to realize that there were pieces of my background that I needed to kind of understand a little bit. So I went to a community, Windsor, Connecticut, which is right on the outskirts of Hartford. 70% of our students were students of color. I was at the time there, I was assistant principal, athletic director, and I was teaching classes. I have always taught as a building principal. I then became a building principal in a school that actually ended up is the reason why I'm here. The Gilbert School in Winstead, Connecticut is a regional high school, middle school and high school, grades 7 through 12. Winstead and Winchester don't like each other very much. I'll just leave it that way. Not like it is here. And we ended up having an incredibly positive experience there. And not a lot of money, not a lot of community businesses. So we did more with less than anybody could ever imagine. And it really was home to me. I really thought my career would end up there. I would be superintendent there. That's where I would retire. In the meantime, Jack was struggling a little bit. He was starting to have seizures. And where do you go for seizures? You don't go to Connecticut hospitals. You go to Boston. So Jack was utilizing children's. I was driving from Litchfield, Connecticut to Boston 3 and 4 nights a week and never missing school. And I finally said, I can't do this anymore. It's not good for me social emotionally. It's not good for my mental health. Jack was asleep when I got to the hospital anyway, so I would just really lie with him. But, everything was good. So I made the decision to come to Mass and wanted to be as close to, he utilizes Perkins School, he utilizes Children's. So I wanted to be as close to Boston as possible. And when I had a couple of choices, I chose Weymouth. And if you don't know Weymouth, it is a city unto itself, the high school. So 2,300 students. Just at the high school, I have 210 faculty, 440 adults. And then we made the decision right before COVID, a new middle school was voted on. And I said, sure, bring the middle school in. I run a middle school. So we brought in the middle school and the high school to run together. And then COVID hit. And it was tight because the building's really not that big for everybody. But what drew me really to Weymouth was the fact that there is a comprehensive high school, 21 AP classes, robust special education program, and a CTE program. And if you know anything about comprehensive high schools with CTE programs, one principal. There's a director for CTE, but there's only one principal. So I learned CTE over the last 5 years, and now I believe it's time to become superintendent. And when I saw Freetown, Jack and I drove here for 3 consecutive Saturdays. I was telling the group, for 3 consecutive Saturdays to the high school to talk to the basketball league, parents sitting in the stands, because you get more information about what a community is like with parents watching games. And so I said, and Jack will talk to anybody, I said, I'm thinking about coming here, which wasn't a lie. What can you tell me about the schools? And all I heard were positives in family and care and community. We went to, I'm going to get the name wrong, is it Fat Cousins Pizza? And we sat there and Jack just loved it. And it was the same thing. It is a community, it is home. It's exactly what I felt like when I was in the Gilbert School. So I'm here now, and I'm excited. It is, our resumes are posted, so people looked at them, and you know, the question becomes, you've been around a little while. So my response to that is, before my son was born, I never would have been here. I would have been retired at 55. I would have gone, and I have a 16-year-old son who is the love of my life, who will never live on his own. I will be working until I'm 70, 75. And if Nick Saban, coach of Alabama, can do it at 70, I'm okay. I think I can handle it. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to answer questions and look forward to chatting. So the floor is yours.
Hello, I'm Anne Marie Sharp from Lakeville, and I'm asking the same question of every candidate that comes up here.
Sure.
Question coming from me wearing two hats in my world. I'm a teacher. I grew up in Weymouth, though, so teacher for Brockton Public Schools for 25 years and resident here with my two kids going through the schools. We're facing a huge teacher burnout throughout the nation, teacher turnover, people who love their jobs like me considering whether I should be doing this anymore or not. Just because of this pandemic putting so much stress on them. How are we going to retain these awesome teachers that we have in the district? And do you have any thoughts on that?
So I taught as a principal at the Gilbert School. I actually just said to the central office team that if I can figure it out, I will be a superintendent who will teach a class, a leadership class to high school students. All I've ever known is teaching. What I have seen over the last 3 years, even the year before, the year prior, was a shift in terms of how teachers were respected, how teachers were treated. The first thing we have to do is stop with what I call initiative fatigue. So the worst thing for a teacher, in my opinion, is a new superintendent, new building principal coming in and saying, everything you used to do, we're going to do differently. That cannot happen. So it's not about new initiatives. It is remarkable, the scores in this community. Remarkable. And we should be incredibly proud of it. It doesn't mean we can't improve things. We can always improve. But there are fantastic things coming here every day, what our teachers are doing. So what we have to do is applaud them. We have to take things that are not contractual off their plate. We have to look and see how we can build more effective relationships, how we can take care of their mental health. Because if we don't take there's a famous book, if you don't feed the teachers, they're going to eat the kids. That's a very famous teacher book. It's not, please don't, it doesn't sound the way, it doesn't sound so bad. We have to take care of our teachers. Kids need teachers who want to be there. And so it's about building relationships. I said this to the last group, and I said it in my first interview. The job title of superintendent starts July 1st. The work, hopefully for me, starts Wednesday night. If that's when they name superintendent, then it's my job. My first responsibility are my seniors who have had a horrible year. If you think about losing 2 classmates. We're doing everything we can to make their year a little bit better, to end their year. My responsibility is to my teachers, and our admin team's ready. They're ready to go. But then the rest of my time is here, getting to know teachers so that when they leave in June, they know who the new superintendent is. It's not about, well, your contract doesn't start. If I've signed a contract and it doesn't start until July 1st, my work, the most important work I might do is going to be from, the middle of March. And I did it, I split days between the Gilbert School and Weymouth. So if I could do it from the Gilbert School and Weymouth every day, it's easy coming from Weymouth to here. Is there a perfect fix? No, but we have to let teachers know we trust them. Their voice has to be heard. Where are you struggling? What's working? What's not working? How can I help you? It's not my way or the highway. I'm the least important piece of all of that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Christina, and I'm from Lakeville.
Hi.
So I'm pretty sure that it was you, but when we had Googled you just to check to see your background and history, it looked like that you may have been like president of the DEI committee or something in your school, yes?
So I am the district coordinator for DEI, as well as principal. Yep.
And what does that look like for all of you in the school?
So it really began because we are a school that's 35% non-white, and student voice is vitally important to me as a leader. And when I came to Weymouth, and again, every community is very different. I didn't do DEI when I was at the Gilbert School. We did a lot of social justice work when we were in Windsor. We did some of it with our EL students, but that was really a little bit different. And then in Weston, we didn't need to change that. We needed to, we just didn't do it. So we have 9 social justice groups in our school. Student voice is vitally important. When we came in, we had not had a student of color who was either a captain or in student council. And that wasn't purposeful. They just didn't feel they had a voice in the community. So now they have a voice. All of our students have a voice. And to me, DEI is really about including all voices. It's not about blowing up curriculum. It's not about putting in political agendas. It's really about allowing students to feel safe and comfortable in their building. My son is a great example of DEI. So inclusion isn't just race.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for.
So so we have a very powerful women's empowerment group in our school. We have 94 girls who are doing remarkable things. And then there's offshoots, women in STEM, women in medicine, women in history, women poets. And what all these groups have done is helped us find places where we need to add some courses, for example. So if course A doesn't have a lot of kids, what about a women's literature course? There's a lot to be said. In order to be it, you have to see it. So our special ed kids, our special education students, I am very proud of the fact that we are going to have next year, we have AP night tonight. So we're going to have 62, I believe it's going to be 62 students who are special education students taking AP. That's DEI work. We now have we have an umbrella, a human rights coalition for all of our offshoot social justice groups. We held, now on the South Shore, you might have read a while ago that students were walking out of their buildings. Braintree, Quincy, I don't know if you saw any of that on the news. At the same time that was happening, we were running our first community forum ever on anti-hate. And there's a big difference between calling something DEI and anti-hate. And our students were quoted in the Globe and all over the place saying, the reason we're not walking out, we want you to walk in because we have a voice here. And that's what DEI work will do. It's not just race.
Perfect. And that's good. That's a good explanation. Because I think that we're diverse in a lot of different ways. And I think cultural things sometimes are, can be more of an issue, but there's religious and other types of diversity that, hopefully everybody can be included.
No question. And I think, one of the concerns I've always had is there cannot be one agenda. There cannot be just one voice, one vision. But no one should be held to feel guilty for who they are. I'm a white male, an older white male, in a community that has changed dramatically. Weymouth for years was predominantly white and now has become, a beautiful mosaic. But There's no agenda. Our agenda is our kids and our kids' voices.
Perfect. Good. And then you did mention propaganda. So I think, you know, after the last 2 years of everything that's occurred, you know, a lot of parents woke up to realize that, you know, there is a lot of propaganda at state level and holding out carrots to get schools to buy into programs that necessarily might not be what a community wants. So I just watched a whole presentation from a neighboring town on SEL, and I was appalled. And so I'm just curious, like, for these types of things, so there'll be monies given, and there'll be monies given for the more kids that they get involved in that program. And it seems very inappropriate to me. Would you, before people having to opt into those programs, and I know, like, you know, you have to write over things to the state so that you get your funding, and all, I'm not saying you in general, but just somebody, sure, to get your funding, but how would you handle the state that way to ensure that we do get our funding for those who want it, but people need to opt into those programs?
So, again, I've been in education for so long. I was the director of, at the time, the student assistance team when I was in Weston. I was young, pre-K to 12, and very similar to what now would be known as student intervention team for kids who were struggling. For our AP kids, they were taking 5 and 6 and 7, and they were struggling. We had kindergartners years ago who were struggling with feeling pressure. Whatever we call it, whether you call it SEL or anything else, we have to make sure our kids are emotionally okay. And there are a lot of ways to do that without indoctrinating students.
Thank you. That's exactly what I did. Yeah, I don't want my children brainwashed. I don't want my grandchildren, because I'll be having some of those shortly, brainwashed. I just want, you know, facts and information. The problem with this presentation was really, like, you know, they said it in the presentation, a kid with a stomachache for a week is going to get sent to the psychologist, and then the psychologist is going to add them to this program where you're going to make money, and the nurse might even go call their physician that has nothing to do with them to tell them that there's a social or an emotional issue. So, like, you know, parenting is first and foremost, and there needs to be a divide between education and the parent and their cultural beliefs and other beliefs. So I guess that's what I was looking for. Do you agree with that? Okay.
So quiet.
Tia Rogers, I live in Lakeville. I have 3 kiddos in the community, high school, middle school, elementary. Okay. I was really excited to hear you reference doing less with more. I think we live in an amazing community. We have amazing administrators and teachers. And I'm going to ask the same question, but frame it a little differently than I did the last candidate. Our per pupil expenditure in Freetown-Lakeville is significantly lower than the majority of communities. So I'd like to hear, you know, your thoughts around how have you done more with less, as it relates to curriculum, instruction, assessment, professional learning. Just to give you some context, having 3 children, one being in high school, you know, I've been in the community long enough. I do work in education as well. And so have an understanding of high quality curriculum materials and, you know, best practices, pedagogical best practices. And so over the years, I think our teachers might not have been equipped with the best tools, and they're doing the best they certainly can. We've had a lot of very outdated curriculum resources that they've been able to utilize. So I just would like to hear how you've done more with less as it relates to curriculum instruction.
Sure.
Supports for teachers.
Sure. So what is your role in education?
Central Office Administrator.
So at the Gilbert School, we were the 3rd lowest per pupil expenditure when I got there. When I left and still I'm in contact with everybody, I think we moved to 5th or 6th lowest. So it's still in the same place. We went from a school that was struggling with being accredited with NEASC the year before we got there to 2 straight years of silver medal last year I was there. We didn't have any more money. We just repurposed our vision We repurposed what was important. I gave an example to central office in my meeting a little while ago. There are lots of ways to cut out some unnecessary things in budgets. So for example, our high school used, and I don't know what you use here. I see our students in the back. Do you use Naviance here? Okay. So Naviance is a program usually through guidance. You know it. I'm not sure all the parents know, but how many of you know Naviance? Okay, so Naviance is as you begin your portfolio moving from middle school to high school, it begins to accumulate so that you can then, as you begin to apply for colleges or moving forward, it's a system that houses a lot of information. It's also ridiculously expensive in my opinion, and there's a far better, more intuitive program called SCORE, which is 1/10 of the price. So if you go for us, it was almost $12,500 down to $900. It is much better. We have a 5-year contract at $900. We're taking that other $10,000 and putting it right into curriculum materials. So I think that if we get smarter and really look from the lens, I was a teacher for 20 years and then I was an administrator who taught. So I've never left the classroom. You know, I certainly, and I said it before, I certainly would like to be a superintendent who teaches a class here with someone else, because I think the more we're in it, the better we are at looking at what we're dealing with on a daily basis. You know, for me to come in and say, well, we have to get rid of these materials would be unfair because I haven't seen them. I think we look at curriculum coordinators. I think we look at the assistant superintendent the director of curriculum and kind of look at what's our cycle? What's our curriculum cycle? So when we create budgets, that has to be a priority within our budget. So we create budgets and everybody thinks about this year's budget. Budget is really a 3-year budget. You know, we create 3 budgets within a year. That's the reality. Level service, level funded, and oh my God, the sky is falling. That's what we create every year, and then it's presented to you. But the reality is, as superintendent, it's my responsibility as well as our entire team to know where we want to be 3 years from now. So that's when we start talking curriculum materials. That's when we start piloting things, because you can pilot an awful lot for free. That's one of the great things that I've learned over the years. Grants are fantastic, but we can pilot an awful lot of materials. PD budgets. You know, I don't know what's happened here. Taking PD from people outside. I know, for example, we've used Highlander Institute here. You know, we looked at Highlander and I think that there are some incredible things there, but I always look at those as they're going to be gone eventually. So is there a way that we can do it here in-house with the experts that we have? I've never forgotten my roots as a teacher, and I've never seen a good teacher who can't run PD for their entire team, whether it's middle school, high school content-based, primary level, grade level. So I think that there are a lot of ways that we can just be a little bit smarter. But again, I would have to get in and really see what has been the curriculum cycle. We have to get into the materials. We have to look at where we're going next year, and then where can we start cutting things. Like Christmas dinner. People just want to eat. Open presents. Spring training? No, I'm only kidding. You know, there are lots of questions. You know, who is this new person coming in? And I've never been a superintendent of schools. So how can you go from being a high school principal to superintendent of schools? I think what's important to understand is a couple of things. Number one, I run a city now. Our budget, including special education, CTE, which are all separate line items, but all fall under the high school budget. So the high school, CTE, not including middle school, which will be going back to its new building in September, and special education is more than the budget here in Freetown-Lakeville. about $45.5 million. So, and so I present the budget. We work with our team and our teachers to take care of budget. We work with our community to talk about budget. The other thing that, and again, you can all look at resumes, you can all Google me, you can all find things. There is no I in my conversation. We have had tremendous success wherever we've gone because we built teams that are transparent, that talk to parents. I'm a parent before anything else. I'm a teacher, and then I am a leader. And my dad is watching me right now saying, what the heck do you want to be a superintendent for? But don't forget where your roots are. And my roots are as a parent, and with two very different visions. Very different visions. I would not be here as a superintendent. I would have retired, first of all, but I would not be here if it weren't for what I learned through Jack in special education. I thought I understood special education. He's given me a whole different lens. And you asked a question about saving money and you know, how can we do things differently? Special education is one of your greatest costs. And I've been incredibly impressed with the few numbers of students who are outplaced. Because that means you're doing the work here. That means it's saving tremendous money. I can give you an example. My son could have very easily gone to the Berkeley School of Music out in Western Mass, which is around $85,000 a year. I'm a public school person. I know what that does to a budget. So the superintendent and I sat down with Jack's mom and stepdad, and we said, what can we do? Let's come up with a curriculum. Well, let's come up with something so Jack can stay home, because staying home is what we want for our kids. This is their community. We don't want them outplaced unless there's an absolute necessity for it. And that comes with a cost. So we found a curriculum where Jack can do math through music. And so it didn't cost the district a lot. They'll always have it, and Jack's happy, saving lots of money. So there are a lot of ways to have those conversations. Anything else? Nothing? You will see if you check Twitter, if you check our Twitter account, yesterday, Saturday morning, visibility is vitally important for any leader. You have to be visible. So Saturday morning, I was at Reggie Lewis Center watching our indoor track team perform in New England. Then I went to Boston for the Model UN. Then we went to Worcester. Jack and I, and Jack follows me wherever we go. Went to Worcester for dance competition. And then yesterday at Bellingham High School for cheer competition. Those people who went on site visits will tell you visibility is vital. And first grade read aloud is just as important as Saturday football. And freshman field hockey is just as important as Friday night basketball. And by the way, I came to the whiteout game here against Titan. That was a trip. It was a trip. So, it's about being at things. It's not just the public or the persona with community, such as town council and businesses. It's about being visible at activities. And you'll just see Jack on my side, and we'll just go wherever we got to go. It'll be great.
You kind of took you answered one of them.
Sorry.
But one of the other thoughts I had was, I think it's no secret we're living in a very divided nation. Mm-hmm. Our town, I think, has seen a lot of that. And if you could speak towards community and bringing people together and how you view that in a school setting or in a district setting.
Thanksgiving dinner, people fight. So, I kind of look at life as if we're transparent and we listen to all stakeholders, our job is to bring people together, see what we can agree to disagree on, see where we have commonalities, because ultimately we have far more commonalities than we think. And then we make a decision that's in the best interest, first of kids, second for our educators. I would be lying if I said that we don't have people who are unhappy with decisions we make. That's part of leadership. So I don't think you're going in that direction. I think what you're really saying is, how do we bring people together? We've had lots of situations in Weymouth in which there was huge divide with what was going on. We had, how much time do I have? We still have time? So, and I'm not talking out of turn, it's just what's in, you can Google it. We had one of our beloved police officers murdered in town when I first started. And he was a member of the football team. Our football coaches were all police officers. Our police are vitally important to our community. Our SRO is right next to me in our suite. And so they asked to have a flag with his shield number brought out onto the football field. That was all great. And then things changed in America. And there was a real divide in our community as to, we want to keep this to support police, and a group of people who said, no, 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 no. We don't want that. That doesn't belong in school. We brought all stakeholders together. We brought the family of the police officer. We brought the police officers in. We brought our students in. We brought our social justice students in. And what came out of it, we ended up naming the new gymnasium in the middle school after Sergeant Chesnut. We ended up doing a scholarship, a $5,000 scholarship to 3 students, a student of color, a student who wants to go into social justice work, and a student who wants to be a police officer, all raised by our students. If you had said to me the first day that's where we would have gotten, I would have said, nope, but we got to a good place. And it's because we were open and very willing to have dialogue. We have to have dialogue. It's the key to teaching our kids how to get through. You know, we talk about kids having resilience, but I think we need to do more in teaching resilience. And resilience is not just during tough times. It's when 2 people disagree, because otherwise relationships fail too quickly. Up, I'm leaving you. Up, I'm doing this. Nope. We're going to sit down in the heart of where we both are is in a good place. Let's find that middle ground.
Thanks.
Hi.
Caroline Sadler from Freetown. I have 3 children in the district, 6th grade, 4th, and 2nd. And, you know, I think we can all agree the past few years just have been anything but typical and have really shaken up education. It's not the same. It doesn't, you know, their experience is nothing like, I tell them all the time, I'm like, I've never had anything like this. What are your thoughts, or even just like outside of the box thoughts, on ways to really address what has been lost, like learning loss, the engagement that we really sort of have lost over the past few years? That does include like social skills and things like that. What sort of ideas have you had, or do you think that you might be able to apply or even support teachers in?
So it's not just supporting teachers, it's supporting parents too. Mm-hmm. And ultimately for our kids. I think we also have to take care of the question about taking care of our teachers who are struggling with new ways to learn. They went from there's very few businesses that could ever handle that, going from one paradigm shift to another. I think that we don't use a term in Weymouth as learning loss, it's learning gaps. And we really got to look at those gaps and look and drill down into the data as to where students are struggling, what they have missed, and then figure out how to recreate curriculum so that we can begin. We're not catching up in a year. We can talk all we want, but the reality is catching up in a year isn't going to happen. It's going to have to be scaffolded. And we have to make sure that our students up to grades 3 and 4 are where they need to be in the next few years, because we've seen what's happened with the data with students who are not on grade level by the time they get to middle school. I know that we've always talked about if they're not reading by grade 3, we're in trouble. But the reality is now we have to make sure by the time they get to middle school that they're in a much better place. So we have to get more creative. We have to allow, that's why I said initiative fatigue for teachers. We have to create planning time in which teachers can sit down and talk about where students are and what can we do differently? We certainly need to be sure that, and I really think, and some people will disagree, that it's habits of mind that we have to reteach first. Before we even teach the academics, we have to teach kids what it's like to be students again, and what it's like to connect with people again, and what it's like to play in the sandbox again. Because they've been so isolated that they've almost forgotten, and we've created this world of fear that I don't want to be near you. And so we've got to come together as a community. You know, I've read some wonderful things from the primary school, the intermediate school in terms of Be Kind and Kindness Week and how we take care of it. That has to be a 24-hour-a-day thing. Just constantly feeding that in while we're working on curriculum. But we have to make sure in June, and I understand I wouldn't be superintendent, but you know, Superintendent Medeiros and I can really start talking about it. The idea that there should be portfolios that are leaving students at the end of each year going to their next teacher so that teachers know where they are. We can't spend 3 and 4 weeks trying to figure out where student A is. We have to know walking in. We have to know in our PD days, and again, I don't know how the district works here, so forgive me for that. Where we are in Weymouth, one of the things that we insisted at the high school was that we got rid of all district PD at the beginning of the year. We have 3 straight days, and all we did was look at where kids were. So we built our data relationship with kids before we built our personal relationship. Because if we waited to figure out where Johnny was and it's the 3rd week of September, we've lost them for the year. That's the reality. So we need to backload it in order to be able to start. We're certainly not going to be sprinting in the beginning, but in order to begin a fast walk to get where we want to go. The other thing that we all need to remember, other than our juniors and seniors, are you all juniors and seniors in the back? No, yes, maybe. Juniors. So our seniors for sure, but our juniors in back, sophomores, freshmen, middle school, primary school, we have no idea what their jobs are going to be looking like when they get out into the workforce, or even what their majors are going to look like. It's so different now that we have to teach these skills that have nothing to do with true academics, but we have to make sure that we're teaching that as well. So when we talk about finances and we talk about money for curriculum, we have to be resilient, we have to be flexible, we have to be adaptable to how the world's changing. Who would have ever thought Google Classroom would be the way to go? But it certainly saves education in a lot of ways. And so, you know, it's not about, we can find 100 people who want 100 different ways to gather information. And for some kids it works and some kids it doesn't work. But we have to start thinking about that now.
I would agree. And my thought also is that while we do have a lot of kids that will have like a lot of holes and a lot of gaps, those same kids might have a lot of skills past their grade level at certain places. So I really feel like my thought is like, have you had sort of like thoughts with yourself about ways to support the school, the administrators and the teachers to be able to be flexible with it? Because, you know, while you might have a child that might be, you know, struggling or a little, you know, basically a little behind in reading, and the time might just get, you know, might be able to catch up with time and the extra support. But in math, they are well above their grade level. And at another time, a teacher might have the time to make, I'm going to have to make a separate group. This is going to be, you know, like, for a critical thinking group about that. And now it's not, because I feel like all of the focus is, and I want the kids to be able to catch up, but I feel like we are so across the board right now that I think that it's really broader than that.
So one of the things, and again, it's easy for me to stand here and give you, I haven't talked to a single teacher other than when I met them in interviews. So this is much more global than it is, this is Alan Strauss's vision. Mm-hmm. I firmly believe in personalized learning plans because every child learns differently. And so we need to be able to determine where students are, where students' strengths are, where students have some gaps, and how to manage both of those. You know, for those of us that are a little more vintage than others, if you remember the Eagles in the Hotel California, you can check in but never leave. That's what education became, is that you are going to be tunneled into this group. Whether it's a reading group, whether it's a math group, whether it's an academic, it doesn't make any difference. This is our chance to change all of that. So we have 60 kids taking AP courses for the first time. We've worked to ensure on the, and I know it's a bad term, but on the social emotional lens, that for our kids who are taking 4 and 5 APs, we still want them to take those classes, but we need to make sure that their habits of mind are back. So we've created a calendar in which you take math and English on Mondays. Tuesdays is science and social studies. Wednesday is art and economics. And those are the only days you can test. So you don't have 5 in a day. There are a lot of things that we can do to help kids so that they are not feeling so overwhelmed. You've got to reteach how not to be overwhelmed.
I would agree. I have one more thing too, is sort of just food for thought. As far as arts in the younger grades, I know as far as Freetown Elementary, we have had awesome music teachers, but no real chance to play instruments and do band and to spark that interest in the younger grades. I'm not sure about Esquonset. And as far as I know, starting in the middle school, there was an opportunity. I don't think, maybe it's with COVID, it hasn't been back. I could be wrong about that because I feel like it's, been choppy the past few years. Do you have any sort of plan to bring that into the younger grades? I feel like that's a real release for a lot of kids. It's a great thing to put their energy in. It's excellent for their brain development.
So I think in explaining that to you, you've got your answer. The music and the arts are vitally important for our kids. And there's a lot of ways to look at art. I mean, I know theater is April 7th, I think is the play. And I'm excited to see that. I think that we have to ensure through grant money, through lots of ways that we can bring instruments in. And that's one of the advantages, having been at the Gilbert School, where we went from nothing for a marching band to one of the best marching bands in 4 years. And it was all through grant money. And how does that start? By what you do in primary school. You can't expect something to happen in high school if you're not building the foundation in primary school. So we have to, again, I haven't talked to anybody. So it's hard for me to say this is what I would do. Do I support the arts? I think, Gene, you have in some artifacts that I gave the school committee, some testimonials from our art teachers and our music teachers and our dance teachers that we're 100% behind it, 100%. We'll do whatever we have.
Well, that's nice to hear. I just figured to put it on the radar.
And my mom was an artist for Walt Disney World, so she's up there too. I'd be in trouble if I wasn't.
We're out of time. If there's any major questions, well, thank you all for your time. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. Pleasure. I do hope I get to see you again, officially. Take care.
Well, good evening. We're about to start with our third and final finalist. Third and final doesn't mean anything other than he just happened to be third in the queue. Today, Chris Gully comes to us from Braintree. He also was a top candidate of, again, I told you earlier, 32 applications we went through. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Chris Gully, who will be here to speak a little bit about his background and then answer your questions.
Thank you, Jean, and hello, everybody. for this formal setting here from the lectern. I apologize if they come off a little professorial at times, but yes, as you heard Jean mention, currently I am the principal at Braintree High School. This is my 4th year at Braintree. Prior to that, I was the assistant superintendent in the Taunton Public Schools, and prior to taking on that role, I was a teacher in Taunton for about 12 years, so about 18 years total at Taunton. I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight. It's difficult to sort of do this work, and I know that you've already had a couple hours at it, so I won't go on too long, and I'll sort of go ahead and give you an opportunity to ask some questions, and I'll try and share as best as I can some of my thoughts. Just briefly, I tell folks sometimes that when I was 3, I first went to a school, and I basically have just been showing up there in September ever since. So I am a creature of education. Both my parents were teachers. They taught for 30 years, one in Canton, one in Norton. And my grandmother even was a teacher. If anybody knows the Taunton area, she was at Walker School in the Ware section. So a lot of teaching. And so a lot of what I learned about education came from my folks, and then also sort of through my experiences in these various districts. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here, talk about school a little bit. And I'm sure we'll hit a number of topics, so I'll go ahead and pause if there are any questions. I can go on, but we can wait and see if there are any. I suspected there might be one or two.
Hi. I've just been asking the same question of every candidate. So I am asking this question wearing 2 different hats. As an educator for 25 years in Brockton and as a parent of 2 kids in the school system. Nationwide, there's a huge teacher burnout turnaround going on right now, and thoughts on supporting the great teachers that we have here and retaining them.
Where do you teach in Brockton?
Everywhere. I'm an art teacher. I've been at the Gilmore, the Downey, and then I've been up at the high school.
Okay.
Now for a while.
I was at East Junior High for a couple of years, and a lot of the folks who were at East ended up at different places, but I don't know if we have any there. We see that. I'm seeing that all the time. I mean, and the frightening part is that through the pandemic and coming out, not only is there some burnout, but there's also limited people entering the profession right now. I'll just be perfectly honest. If I had the answer for that, then I'd be doing it right now in my school, and we would all feel satisfied. And based on the conversations that I had even today in an administrative meeting, that's not the case. I do think that sort of people tend to motivate themselves when they're feeling valued. Now the question then becomes, how do you feel valued? There's obviously any number of ways on the surface, but sort of offering sort of a special cake on a special day doesn't quite do it. I think the way that people feel valued in teaching is, as an administrator, number one, you need to be there with them. So you need to be in classrooms. You need to be at the after-school activities. You need to be when a club meets or when there's a field trip. You need to support people, and you need to be physically present so that they understand what they are seeing, you are seeing as well. There's nothing worse than when an administrator comes with a plan for something new, and immediately the teachers can say, that just will not work. And the reason it will not work is because you never looked. So I think that's important when you want to demonstrate to people that they're valued, is being there, present, being in classrooms, as a district administrator, also being in schools and sort of being present and able to hear from folks what they're thinking. What are the issues that they are facing? I think we also have some specific issues right now. I know in our experience at my current school, things have been difficult this year because we came back in September, and I think after the summer, many people thought, great, here we go. Other than masks, we're back to normal. And that clearly hasn't been the case. So we're now asking teachers to do more at the point where they are significantly worn out from what happened the year before. We've been trying to address that in different ways. I think sort of, again, like I mentioned, presence is important, but also sort of trying to be very specific with what supports you can put in place. And that's going to vary building to building. I think it also varies grade level to grade level. I have a group that meets sort of on a biweekly basis where I have a chance to talk to teachers and sort of try to find out what exactly is going on in your classroom that matters most. What can we address? And sometimes it's something as simple as, seemingly simple as the last conversation I had was about email. And it was about, look, we did a year of remote in which conversations that worked sort of through email, that worked through sort of the various different communication servers that we have were almost constant. And now sort of some of that is carried over even when it shouldn't, and even when it can't. So that's an issue that was brought to me that I think we can try and address so that people are still able to turn off, people are able to go home and sort of have lives outside of school, and not feel that constant tug of trying to be there every single moment. The one other thing I'll say about that is encouraging people to enter the profession also gives some lessons about how to support people in the profession right now, in education in general, both classroom teachers, school counselors, administrators as well. One of the things that I've done is through the DESE, I'm a reviewer for educator prep programs. So in other words, a college or a university that trains teachers to licensure. And some of the lessons that come through that I find particularly helpful, again, in sort of how to support teachers, how to make sure that people have the resources they need. There's nothing worse than being told to do something and not having the resources. So that's one thing that I've drawn from that we've tried to do at our school.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And then I don't see anyone behind me, so I'll ask the other question that I have. Across the nation, we are very divided. It trickles down to our kids' thoughts on building community within the district.
And when you mentioned divided, I assumed the same old, that sort of, it's hard for us to come to consensus on many issues.
Correct. Yep.
I think if you want to have a cohesive community, from my mind, you start with communication first. So the way that distrust builds is when people don't know what you're for, what you're trying to build towards, and when people feel like they don't have a voice in what goes on. I think many of the divisions that you mentioned are real, right? People disagree. But what we've lost a little bit, and I'm not talking about here, I'm talking as the question indicated, I'm talking sort of nationally, but it affects us in Massachusetts as well, obviously, is that the ability to disagree without being disagreeable, for lack of a better term, has been lost a little bit. I can't personally sort of turn the country around, but I do know that in our district, in our school in particular, we've tried to address that through dialogue. We've had some contentious issues come to school committee that addressed our school issues of making changes, graduation gowns for one thing, the nature of our school's mascot, the iconography attached with that, sort of the various imagery that goes along with that. And I've seen it work both ways. I've seen it be effective. I've seen it be not effective. When it's effective, when we're able to make change together, you need to have a transparent process and you need to bring in all the voices. You might not like what you hear as a leader, and it might be challenging, and that's for the good, because if an idea is challenged, there's a good chance that it's not a good idea. So you need to be able to have these conversations where you're open and you hear from folks and you allow people's voices to be heard. If you do, I find that you can get places and you can come to, if not consensus, you can at least come to agreement that the process was fair, that you were an honest broker, that you represented your thoughts, but you allowed both sides to voice their opinions. The district that I'm in right now has partnered with a nonprofit called Essential Partners. And Essential Partners is focused on providing training to allow people to have difficult conversations. And that could be either in a formal sense. In other words, we're going to have, say, a forum like this, if we were discussing a contentious issue as a district, or in informal settings. So like a conversation, an informal conversation after school, a situation where perhaps teachers were talking with students, because this is something that again is a dangerous, is fraught these days. And so using folks like that who can give you clear techniques, I think gets more people to the position where they're able to have these conversations and they're able to facilitate those conversations so that we're able to have a difference of opinion without getting divisive. So those are some of the ideas that I would use.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Christina from Lakeville. So first, I just want to see, do you also have a background in law?
Do I have a background in law?
Yeah, are you a bar attorney?
No, I'm not.
Okay, I got that information. I just wanted to check.
Okay.
And did you say that you actually were superintendent at Taunton for a short amount of time?
No, I was the assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction for 6 years.
Okay, excellent. And so just on the topic of all of these programs that the state want to put in that don't really have to do with core education, like your DEI and your SEL and some of those that can be divisive, where do you stand on some of those? And if you found that in this community, some parents weren't interested in taking monies for being part of those programs, like how would you help to ensure that everybody could be happy in a situation like that?
Yeah, I guess I would return a little bit to parts of that previous answer where I'd have to know more specifically about what programs from the state we would be talking about, because there are some things, this was a few years back, but there are some things that the state says that we have to do, and that's not a discussion. There are other things, I think you were mentioning, like if there's an incentive for a particular program, is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, so like I know, just looking at some of the history with the state and some of the lawsuits that went through for, kind of a framework that they were supposed to make through laws in the court. Like I know social part of it and children understanding their social being and understanding that part. But, now we have like SEL with the emotional learning too, and psychologists coming into the school. And there are children that will definitely benefit from that. Mm-hmm. But for other families and their cultural values and religious values, honestly, it could be a hindrance, an aggravator, trampling on parents, right to rear their offspring the way that they want to. So, there's a fine balance with those things and totally, socially, yes, but then now we have this new emotional learning piece that got trampled in. And I was telling the last candidate, I just saw the most appalling video discussing it in our neighboring town, and I was just appalled and disgusted by it. I feel like some children, yes, would benefit, but not yet. They want to put all the high school kids in and, check this person off, and then they become part of it because they had a bellyache for a week, and now they think it's a social emotional issue, and, they get money for each of those children, and that stuff petrifies me. I don't want my children or my grandchildren to be part of that.
I guess probably the best way that I can answer that without sort of thinking of, specific funding or specific programs is that my interest in an administrator is giving kids what they need. So I've always been of the idea that the more you can personalize a student's experience in school, the better. That may mean academically, that may mean social and emotionally. In some cases, extreme cases, that might mean medically. Sort of you have to personalize the experience to support that student. So in terms of what is offered by the state or sort of what is offered more broadly, I think you need to stay attuned to what is current. You need to stay attuned to what works for students. But I also think that you need to look at each student individually and try and determine what works best for them. That being said, if we're looking at academic standards, if we're looking at, goals that are presented by the state, My interest would be in making sure that all students get what they need. And there are times when that might be uncomfortable. Certainly not to the point where we're going to, cause undue stress where somebody can't come to school. But I think you have to be clear about what you're providing for students, as personal as possible. And then also you need to discuss with the community what's going on and what the purpose is for. So I know that's a little bit broad, but without sort of thinking about a particular program, I guess that's where I would approach that.
It is broad. Like if you had an email, I'd love to share that presentation with you. Like I don't want us as a community getting trapped into that without really understanding what it can be and what it could do to the kids here.
I think that's probably available through the committee could have an email.
Yeah, perfect. Then just in general, the whole masking situation, how did Braintree do? What were the thought processes on it? What do you now in hindsight, how do you feel about all of that?
So let me say this first, is that I think the hardest part for masks was, for me and for a lot of people in my school, we had last summer where we went about our lives. And when we came back in September, we said, I think school is going to be regular school, but with masks. And I think masks were an issue, but I think the larger issue was that students were just not at the place that we would expect them to be in September. They had a lot more needs, and they were not the same students as when we left. So for me, in our building and in my experience, that was the larger issue, was where people were, even coming back from a long break or from hybrid or sort of whatever structure learning they had. In Braintree, the school committee did not adopt any local mask mandate for this school year. So when the state mandate expired after February vacation, there was no local mandate. So we went to a mask optional setting. It's been interesting. I would say day one, when I was out in front of the school, I would have pegged it at maybe 40% of students still wearing masks. By the end of the week, maybe more like 25 to 30% of students wearing masks. We've done some messaging to try and say that masks are optional, but we're going to support everybody in our community, whatever choice they make. And we've had some success with that. We haven't had any conflict on that since we've come back after February vacation.
That's good. And then if, say, you had a child who had a religious exemption against masking, how would you treat that situation?
Well, we don't have to mask, so I guess we would be all set.
I'm saying during the actual masking part of it.
I really wouldn't want to address a hypothetical without having a specific case in front of me, but
so yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. So, I mean, we have civil rights, and that's one of them. And if you're going to give medical exemptions and kids don't wear a mask, then a religious one should certainly follow. So there was some, back and forth with files that were done to show that, superintendents were told, and school boards were told that, they'd have to figure out what they would want to do with these one-offs that were religious exemptions for masks. It could wind up being costly through courts, and so they would have to determine that. But from a grounding standpoint of being an American, and there's a constitution that supersedes all, and there's civil rights that you, now that you understand that part of it, what do you think that your decision would be if you were the deciding person?
I think I would go back to what I just said. I mean, it's hard to know without sort of the specifics in front of you. And as always, I would rely on sort of what we hear from the state and what we hear from our district council.
Myself, 3 kids in the community, high school, middle school, elementary school. So I asked a similar question to the last 2 candidates. So, seeing my kiddos go through the schools, I think we have an amazing group of teachers. We have an amazing group of educators, and an amazing group of students. And I think my worry over the years has been around curriculum, instruction, assessment. And I think teachers do an amazing job, but when they don't have kind of, you know, high quality curriculum in front of them or professional development that's, you know, putting research-based practices at the forefront of what they're doing, it puts it all kind of in the teacher's lap. And I think over the years, personally as a parent, I've seen, I feel like we can do better, I guess. I feel like I wonder about the curriculum revision process that we have in town. And I just would like you to speak to your experience around as it relates to curriculum instruction.
Let me start with the curriculum part of it. Curriculum needs to be ongoing. Sometimes we have a sense that we pick a curriculum, we quote unquote choose a program, and then we're all set and there we go. And in my experience, what works better is if you think of curriculum as an ongoing cycle. So you pick the number of years, let's say that it's a 6-year cycle, and you know in advance as a district where you need to address, where you need to put your energies along that cycle. So if it becomes sort of something that is reactive and you have a situation where you're not changing, or conversely, you're trying to add in 1, 2, 3, or 2, 3, 4 things at a time, then I think teachers don't have the opportunity to actually learn what's in the curriculum. I feel strongly that curriculum is something that we design, not something that we just purchase off the shelf. Resources are important. You can't ask teachers to just make something up. But at the same time, I think if you design curriculum, then you can have something that works for the students in front of you. We have standards from the state. We know where we're headed. How we get there is our choice. And I think that works best when you bring teachers and administrators and community members together, students when appropriate, if you have some higher grades, and you have a chance to actually look at what are we teaching, what do we value most, what is the best way for us to get to these standards. And that may be drawing on a particular resource, or it may be sort of designing something on your own. I'll just give you 2 examples from the school that I'm at right now. In one, the history department has sort of selected some resources that they use to teach their new sequence, which they found to be very useful for students. So there's a textbook, there's some online resources. They felt like it matched up to what they wanted to get across. Conversely, the math department at the school, not recently, but over the course of a number of years, have developed their own courses to the point where they moved past really having a particular sort of off-the-shelf standard textbook, and they've really designed their whole curriculum for, we start with geometry, but geometry, algebra, and into the pre-calc for everybody. So that was a result of teachers coming together and saying, here's what's in front of me, here's what I think our students need, and here's how we think we can make it better. And they made it better over time. So I think it's really a question of revisiting what you're teaching, and this, no matter the levels, this is early grades or high school, revisiting what you're teaching and saying, how do I make it better? But doing it also on a schedule where as a district, we can understand. This is particularly important at the early grades. If I'm a 3rd grade teacher, I'm teaching multiple subjects. If I'm getting 2 new curricula in 1 year, then I'm going to struggle to really implement it well. I think part of your question was professional development as well.
Yeah, I think that, like, how are we supporting teachers? Like, as I said, we have amazing teachers, and I'm not too sure, but I do think the community is not funding like coaches or, that ongoing professional support. I might be wrong on that. I don't know. But, just that ongoing professional.
Sure. Well, the first thing I would do would try to find out what exactly that structure is. And there's multiple ways to support teachers in curriculum. Whatever the standard or whatever the most effective professional development schedule would be is one way. So if that's a pull-out day, if that's some half days, if that's some work during the summer, if teachers are available, you want to support them that way. But I will say that is a priority whenever possible. If teachers can be supported in their buildings, in their rooms, then I find that they can really progress rapidly in sort of learning not just what they're trying to teach, but also the methods, because the method is a big part of it. I've been in districts where there were significant shifts, and I think most of us would find particularly at the early grades, or the instructional model different than we might remember from being students. But there's been a significant shift, and that can only get done if there's ongoing support in the buildings, in the classrooms. The means to do that, That's a challenge because you have to find a way that both works for a district and also is financially feasible for the district to support. But that's the only way that real change gets done when it comes to curriculum instruction. Thanks.
Hi, Chris. How you doing?
Hi. Good. How are you?
Steve Mitchell, Lakeville. Congratulations, by the way, being one of the 3 finalists.
Thank you.
My question would be around, of the 3 candidates, you're the most local. So I'm just curious what your insight would be in terms of, this particular area, some thoughts around what the needs might be. And then maybe a second part to that, like what is the first 100 days, if you're selected as superintendent, might look like for us?
Sure. I would like to think that that anybody with anybody with a good vision for education can succeed anywhere. I do think that our part of the state is a little bit different. I'll just as an example of that, sort of I have friends that perhaps I went to college with who live elsewhere in the country, and they have one picture of what Massachusetts is, and I say, well, it's not always like that. I think there's more diversity of thought in Massachusetts, and I think in our part of the state, we have a certain independence, and we have a certain ideal that we want to be able to figure things out for ourselves. That might not be the case everywhere. I shouldn't say that. Everybody wants to figure things out for themselves, but that doesn't necessarily run concurrently with what everybody in the state feels. I think we are in this part of the state. We sort of never thinking about culture isn't something new. Thinking about culture is something that sort of has always stayed here and has been through, and that may be in terms of nation of origin. That may be in terms of language. That may be in terms of any number of differences that we've just always had and honored in a very different way, in a very sort of authentic way, I think. There are people in Boston who I think for them, Bristol County is like part of Rhode Island. So there's always that part of it that you have to work against a little bit. But from being down here, to be honest, sort of north of Boston probably would have been like a blank map when I was growing up, and I didn't know that. So I do think that there are characteristics that we have here that make us sort of independent and sort of not always seeing things the same way as everybody in the state in a positive way. First 100 days, I won't count down to the exact day, but I guess I would have to say the first thing I would do would be listen. I have thoughts about sort of how school districts should work. I have thoughts about curriculum. I have thoughts about sort of the logistical elements of schools. But I think it would be presumptuous, other than immediate crises. It would be presumptuous to say, I'm going to know sort of from this process and from being an observer precisely what is right for this school community. I would make a point of speaking to families, speaking to administrators, speaking to teachers, speaking to students, and trying to get a sense of where are we as a district? What's next as a district? That's one of the questions that I've been trying to ask in the groups. What's next? What do people think is on the horizon? And sort of what do we think of those are the things that we can focus on? So that would be the broad picture. Very specifically, there are certain things you have to do anytime you start in a new position. Safety and security would be the first thing that I would check. Financial well-being would be something that I would check. And, buildings and grounds to ensure that everything is where they need to be. Those are sort of more straightforward. But I think more broadly, I would want to find out from everybody, what do you think is most important? I try to make myself available. 100 days would spill into the school year. So that involves being at schools, that involves being at extracurricular activities, be it sort of a football game, be it a concert, whatever the case is, because I think you find out more when you're having those less formal conversations than you necessarily hear from strictly formal conversations. So I would want to make myself part of those, allow people the opportunity through presence to get their input into me. Thanks.
Jean Fox, School Committee, and resident of Freetown in Bristol County, Lakeville, Plymouth County. Just thought I'd point that out. We are two very proud communities that work really super hard to make sure we can fund our schools. And we get kind of short shrift sometimes from DESE, oftentimes from DESE, including the $30 per student that they're looking at giving us this year.
The new formula?
The new formula, right. I've already written to Ways and Means on that, and they actually may have a plan, TBD. My issue is that we've the two communities that are growing. Lakeville's grown leaps and bounds faster than Freetown for any number of reasons, done a super job managing their community, and Freetown's working hard doing the same kind of things. But critically important to us, since the lion's share of both towns' budgets go to support our schools proudly, but it takes from other things. Having good relationships with both communities is essential to being successful as superintendent. How would you go about establishing those relationships?
With each community?
Yep.
I think the obvious answer, and I apologize if this is straightforward, would be going to meet people and talk to them. It's in my experience, sort of, if you have, I'll give you just an example from the nonprofit world. They talk about for fundraising in nonprofits that anytime there's an ask, you should have spoken to the person 6 times before. It's an old rule of thumb. But the point being, I can't have a relationship with people that involves simply, here's a problem, I need you to talk about it right now. You need to have an ongoing conversation and relationship with people so that they know who you are, they're aware of what's going on. Everybody has a shared sense of what is coming down the road, be it this budget cycle or be it 10 years from now. I would try to make myself as sort of available as possible. I've had some success at doing that in my current district with an opportunity to speak with the mayor, speak with the school committee, again, working with the superintendent and the district administrators. But sort of not just coming to people with your needs, but sort of listening to their sense of how the schools are doing, their sense of what is necessary, their feedback, because people who work in the towns, both in terms of, I'm talking mostly sort of, people who might be an official in the town, but also more broadly, they get a sense of sort of what are people looking for and what are people interested in the town. So you really leverage your ears and you get a sense of what everybody is talking about. I would try to be honest and transparent. I would try to get people information in a timely manner so that nobody is surprised. And that involves the community as well. So that if we know that there's something coming up 6 months out, it does nobody any good to sort of wait and try and say, this is what has to happen. So I've tried, and I would try in this position best as I could, to be clear and to try to look a little bit more, a little bit out on the horizon so that folks know what's going. There's other ways, there are specific ways, which obviously some of which I would have to learn about collaboration. In terms of that, then it's a question of sort of trying to be honest about sort of who needs to do what when, and sort of being a good partner so that you understand how you can contribute to the community above and beyond. Obviously, educating students is our first goal, but there's any number of ways in terms of communication, in terms of support, in terms of facilities, in terms of being a partner for the community so that they can not only feel pride, but also can see tangible benefits from how well the schools are doing. So I think those are some of the things that you need to have in place in order to get a positive relationship that's ongoing, not just in a time of crisis or in a time of need. Sure. Sure. Well, I just want to say thank you, first of all. It has been a long evening, and sort of being a part of this process is difficult. It takes you away from your homes. It sort of, you have to watch me at a lectern. There's any number of things that sort of are challenging, but I do feel that anytime people come together to talk about school, it benefits all of us, so that we have an opportunity, even through this process, to learn a little bit more about what we all value, what hopefully we will collectively value in the future. I can say that sort of I have a range of experiences both on the building level and on the district level. I think that sort of because of that, I've developed a perspective where I not only want to learn what the communities want, but I'm bringing some ideas from different districts that I would want to incorporate with what is the best that we have in place and try to move everybody forward. So there's a lot to think about, but again, the most I want to say is thank you. You've been here for a long time, and I appreciate you listening to me tonight. Thanks.
Sincerest thanks to all of you. I know it was long. We appreciate all the questions. We appreciate everybody's listening ears. This is a big decision that we're making. So please, if you have a moment, check out the QR codes. One person indicated she'd prefer to just email. You can email the blanket school committee email address. We really want your feedback, what your impressions are. So this is the first time you've met them. That would be very valuable to all of us. So thank you for your time. Have a great night.